joining us now to talk about more is journalist, author, and host of the Trish Intel podcast, Trish Regan. Trish, thank you so much for joining us. Talk to us a little bit about your reaction to this dust-up. As we said earlier in the show, either you want the truth or you're trying to frame the argument. It seems quite clear that Nancy Pelosi is more committed to framing this argument for the American people than she is in actually finding out what exactly happened on January 6th.
Yeah, Joe, I would 1,000% agree with you on that. I mean, they're not after the truth here. This is just another witch hunt. It's another opportunity to grandstand. It's an opportunity, frankly, and this is what's most disturbing about all of it, to somehow sanction the idea that they can shut down anyone they don't agree with. Therefore, anybody, which by the way was like half the country, that may have supported Trump or voted for Trump is somehow now, in their conspiracy theory world, part of this, right? It's an excuse to go after people. And this is what's so disturbing about it. I mean, if you want to have a commission to try and get to the bottom of what actually went down, then yeah, okay, put both sides on it. But this is just a dog and pony show, you know, and they're going to milk it for everything it's worth. You know, I used to talk about the shift show, remember, with the shift circus. Now this is a new version of the circus has come to town with Nancy Pelosi and company, and they're going to have this commission, and they're going to make every Republican and every Trump supporter's life as miserable as they can.
I mean, it's crazy. I mean, we used to have that old saying, right, an investigation in search of a crime. Now we just seemingly have a sham investigation in search of an argument people will buy because they're no longer clearly interested in having an open, robust dialogue. How in the world, in your opinion, can you have a conversation about what happened on January 6th if no one in the room is going to be asking the pertinent question of why in the world was the perimeter left unsecure?
Oh, I know. I mean, like the basic stuff, right? It's almost as though they wanted this to happen because it feeds a narrative that, oh, conservatives are violent people that are going to take over the government, right? That's the narrative that they have going for them right now. And so you have to ask, well, why wasn't there better security? And let's be clear. There were a lot of protests that happened over the summer leading up to this, right, with Black Lives Matter. Did we see any real investigations into any of that? No. I mean, there were violent protests where businesses were destroyed, and nobody seemed to care about that. In fact, if anything, they kind of sanctioned it, right? Oh, well, it's their right to do that. And we had people saying, well, there's insurance that'll cover. I mean, crazy, crazy stuff. And yet when this happens, they all freak out. Look, I'm not justifying it in any way, shape, or form. I mean, I think it was a pretty awful day for the nation. That said, if you really want to get to the bottom of what went down, you need to understand, where were the Capitol Police? Why was there not better security? And Joe, by the way, what the heck was the head of the Black Caucus doing inviting protesters to Capitol Hill just the other day? Right? Bringing them right in. I mean, that's very different than really Donald Trump standing outside giving a speech. It's really, it's remarkable. There's no effort right now to get to one, truth, or two, healing, right? Nobody wants to heal because the more you divide, the more you can conquer. And that's what this is about.
Absolutely. We've gone from people cherry-picking Dr. King quotes, violent riots are the language of the unheard, to suddenly apparently every single person that went to hear Donald Trump that day, and for that matter, everyone that voted for him, is an unabashed insurrectionist, and therefore they're not even allowed to be present to have the conversation. Congressman Jody Arrington was actually on Newsmax talking about this and more, and why Pelosi in many ways needs to be a focal part of this January 6th probe. Take a listen.
She is the chief executive of all of the United States House administration. Sergeant of Arms reports to her, the Capitol Police report to her. If there was going to need backup in the form of the National Guard, she would make that request. She should be a target of this investigation.
Absolutely. And here's what Congressman Jim Banks actually had to say to the New York Post after he was rejected by Pelosi. Quote, "I served my country in Afghanistan, and she is saying that I am not up to playing a serious role on this January 6th committee. But it just goes to show all along this was never a serious effort on their part. It was all a political witch hunt." And to me, the statement goes on. But Trish, to me, that says it all. This notion that, again, the Democrats have decided who the good Americans are. They've decided what their version of the events was on that particular day, and they're not going to let anybody or anything stand in the way of them portraying and projecting that message out to the American people, of course, with their allies in the media holding the bullhorn to let them do it.
And Joe, think about how everybody has just gone along for the ride on this. Think of big business. Think of the corporate media. Think about how everybody is in line with this. I mean, the media has their own agenda, right? But when it comes to big business now, they are so terrified of getting the finger pointed at them that they're saying, okay. I mean, you had, Raytheon, the second largest defense company, coming out with a whole woke manual for employees recently, telling white men they needed to step aside. I mean, there is an agenda here, and everyone is afraid. Nobody's willing to stand up for basic freedoms, right? To say we should look at people and make sure that they all have equal access to opportunity. We're not going to guarantee the outcome, but we're sure as heck going to do everything we can to make sure every single American has equal access to opportunity, while simultaneously making sure that every American has the right to their own thoughts and their own speech. And instead, they're coming along, and this is very authoritarian, and they're trying to shut down anything. And they've got business on their side. They've got the media on their side. And so half the country now is sitting there saying, well, wait a second, they're painting me like this. And they put you in a corner. I mean, how do you come back from that? If somebody charges that you're a racist, this is why companies are so scared. What do they say in response? No, I'm not. Immediately, you're on the defensive. These are heinous charges. These are awful charges. And I just want to get back to an America where people are valued for being people. And we don't have all this other stuff going on. And we accept each other and we're empathetic with one another. That has been entirely lost.
Absolutely. In fact, Minority Leader McCarthy, he just wrapped that press conference we told you about earlier. He fired back at Speaker Pelosi, defending her decision to block those Republicans, Jim Jordan and Jim Banks. I want you to take a listen and have our audience hear what he had to say.
This is a sham committee that's just politically driven by Speaker Pelosi. When we proposed to do a commission back in January, she said no, she just wanted to make it political. When we responded back to her, she waited 10 weeks to say anything else. I don't think anybody in America, I think even your viewers understand what a sham this committee is and how politically driven.
So, Trish, obviously on some basic level, the gloves are off. I don't think there's any way that we can find any common ground here, as disheartening as that may be. How do we find a way through here, particularly if we can't solve our politics, then how do we try to heal a nation?
I'll tell you, people have to go out and vote. And, as discouraged as they are, and I know a lot of people are like, well, wait a second, my vote's really not going to count. Conservatives need to be organized. And by the way, this is not just a conservative thing. If I were, a real liberal, I'd also be concerned because they're shutting down and how quickly this can turn on itself, right? If they're doing this to conservatives, who's to say they couldn't do it to liberals? You need to stand up for some principles here. And I think everybody has to do their part, and there needs to be a real shift in 22. And we need to send a message to the likes of Nancy Pelosi that we as Americans are not okay with shutting down half the country. This is unacceptable. And the theatrics and the politics, it needs to end. They have to actually, Joe, really be concerned about the economic well-being of our country, about the social well-being of our country, and get away from the theater, because that's what this has come down to, a big old theatrical spectacle.
Absolutely. I want to pivot here, touch a little bit about President Biden's town hall last night. Obviously, he was very much engaged in trying to defend the drunken spending that is occurring on his watch, that $3.5 trillion in spending that was proposed, this proposal to vote for a bill that hasn't even been read. Talk to us specifically about the dangers of this spending. Obviously, we know your background very well, the negative impact that this type of blank check writing has on seniors with that fixed income, on the working poor in this nation who have limited wages, as we see stagflation galloping like we've never seen since we had a peanut farmer named Jimmy Carter in the White House.
I'm glad you brought that up, Joe, because it really does feel sort of like, we're back in the 70s and I was just a little kid. But I remember those gas lines and I remember the stories, right? And you remember the grainy video. Everything looked pretty miserable. We're kind of going back to that. And I'll tell you, this spending, it is extremely dangerous. And I'm not going to just, blame this all on Biden, right? Because you look back over the last 15, 20 years, we've had a lot of spending from a lot of politicians that are very concerned about the here and now, and they're not concerned enough about making sure they preserve this country for the future. So there's a lot of blame to go around here, but right now it's squarely on the shoulders of Joe Biden because he is so willing to spend. And here's the problem with that, Joe. Guess what? They keep printing money like this. They keep giving out money like this. It causes inflation, hyperinflation. We are already seeing examples of it. A gain of 5.4%, something we haven't seen in 13 years for the consumer price index. Prices are going up. Gosh, diapers are up 14% from this time last year. Oil costs are way up. Therefore, what you put in the gas tank, way up. All of this takes a bite out of consumers' paychecks. And so if you're living on a fixed income, like many older Americans, effectively you got less money, right? Because everything costs more. And this is a runaway train. You keep printing and you're going to wake up one day, we're already at 28 trillion and counting in debt, expected to go upwards of 30 trillion in the next year. What are we leaving for our kids? Basically, the equivalent of a third world country politically and economically. So this is a real disaster. It's a real mess. I'd like to see some responsibility from some people in Washington, but you're not going to get it. You're not going to get it with this crowd because Joe Biden is in the camp of Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They hate business. They want to tax business. They want to tax investment. They want to tax individuals because they want the government to have the money. This is going to have an extremely negative impact on our economy going forward. And I hope people understand that because it's a really big deal. I've been talking about it a lot on my show, and I care so much about our economic health and the ability to give our kids something better.
Absolutely, 100%. It's all fun and games until seniors can't buy food and parents can't buy Pampers. Trish Regan, as always, we appreciate you. God bless. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Joe.
Hi, Emma Reckenberg here. If you like this video, there's a whole lot more to see on Newsmax TV. You can watch for free right here on our YouTube live stream and be the first one here each time our experts break down real news. Just hit that subscribe button, ring the bell icon, and stay with us on America's fastest growing cable news channel, Newsmax TV.